Good. So today we're going to talk about, we're starting with what happened after Jesus, Christianity, just a bit of a, not going to do a whole historical thing again, because we want to go to texts, right? That's what this course is about. So I want to go from that point on, what happened and how did Christianity become a dominant religion. And so then we're going to go to the early stage of Jews under Christianity. In this case, before the birth of Islam, so to say. And next week, we're going to do some more about that same community, Byzantine Jews. That means Jews who lived in the Byzantine Empire. And what that means, we're going to explain later, after the birth of Islam. So today we're starting with the earlier part. And there's two texts that I want to go over. But first, some historical background. So a short historical preview. So shortly after, not too long, a few decades after the life of Jesus, there were three Jewish wars, by the way, but the first Jewish war occurred then. It started in 66. And that was another of these messianic revolts against the Romans. I'm sure you all paid attention very well, and you know what that means. It means that somebody says, I'm the Messiah, and now God is going to help me liberate the country, the Jewish people, from the Roman oppression. So these people had some followers, and this is what a messianic revolt is like. Now, in all these cases, to be honest, all ended in huge disasters. So, unfortunately, many lives. Now, this was the most well-known one. This is called the First Jewish War. It was an outright war against the Romans. And there were actually more than one Messiah. There were, I think, three who were competing with each other with different followers. But eventually, they all fought the Romans and a bit each other also. But what was the result? The result was the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. And so that is going to be soon enough, 2,000 years. In our lifetime, hopefully, at least I hope in your lifetime. If it's in my lifetime, that was in the year 70, then I'll be 110. So I hope I'll live to well, it's not celebrating, but in any case, always good to live a long life, no matter what the occasion is. Destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. There was a huge loss of lives, just because Romans were not softies. So whenever they massacred, and not only that, there was also a hatred among the Romans against the Jews. That was increased. Why? Because they would say, look, all these other people, we conquer them, and they are happy to join the Roman Empire, and we can keep the peace. But these Jews, they have an exceptional situation. They are not obligated to participate, to show their loyalty by sacrificing, bringing sacrifices in one of our temples to the emperor, because they are stuck up about that. They don't want to do that. Okay, we give them that. They are allowed to keep their own religion, which means not participating in ours. And still they have this exceptional position, preferred position, privileged, and they still revolt against us. It has to be over with these Jews. Finish them off. Now, if you're a Christian, but you're a Roman, and what is it they say? You live in Rome, but you embrace Christianity, and they would say, so you have this, you're following this Christianity, isn't that a type of Judaism? Yeah, it comes from Judaism. Okay, and what about these Jews? Look at how they all revolt. And then Christians would typically probably say, I can imagine, well, we don't agree with the Jews. It is horrible what they do. And I agree because you're a Roman. You're part of that culture. You read the same news. You look at the same news channels, and you watch the same social media. So to say, right? So, you would say, you know what? Then they don't even understand their own Bible, because the Messiah already came. So why? Stupid that they're revolting, because they want the Messiah to come, but they already came. So that would be Christian theology at the time, if that makes sense to you. Now, this was the first Jewish war. The second Jewish war was not too, let's say, one generation later, and it was called the Kitos War, and hardly anyone ever hears about that. Also, it didn't take place in the Holy Land. It took place outside. It started, I believe, in Cyprus, but then it spread Egypt, Libya, North Africa a lot, and those were big, huge Jewish communities who all felt maybe the time is right. And they also had leaders, at least one, who said he was the king and he was the Messiah, and he's going to defeat the Romans with God's help. So we all have to participate to be part of this epic battle on the right side of the equation, on the good side, not be with the Romans. Now, this is horrible, but can you believe 460,000 Romans were killed eventually? This is a true bloodbath. And so this is a black page, an example of a black page in Jewish history, because it is blinded by messianic hope, in a way. Messianic hope could give people, support, thinking, it's bad, but eventually God will. But if you start acting upon it, it could be detrimental. And that's what you see here, unfortunately. So the Romans were killed in Libya almost. And then the Romans came and retaliated and killed all the Jews in these countries. As a result, for instance, in Libya, all the Romans, meaning the non-Jews, were killed, and then all the Jews were killed. What's the result? Libya was totally depopulated. There was nobody left in Libya. It had to be repopulated from outside. I mean, we're talking about bad times in our days, but this is, and I have to say, this is one of the, I already said, I'm going to address some black chapters in Jewish history. This is when the Jews were at least hoping for some independence, and, well, also understandably striving towards it. But at the other hand, we were here like ISIS and the Taliban. You know what I'm saying? This was Jews were not always the innocent victims here. Eventually became the victims, but these revolts all ended up in disaster, not just for others, but for the Jewish people themselves. Okay, now the third Jewish war happened, only, what is it? This was ended in 117. And so, let's say 15 years later. And this was in the Holy Land, the Bar Kokhba revolt, another messianic figure. He was accepted, recognized as the Messiah, even by some of the leading rabbis of the day. And he also succeeded in conquering part of the Holy Land and Jerusalem. And he already started rebuilding the temple and started with restarting the sacrificial service. So a lot of Jews were killed as a result, see? More than 500,000. Now, there weren't so many people. The world is much denser now. So 500,000 is humongous, even in our days. But in those days, when there's only a few million Jews in the whole world, this is like a Holocaust in a way. But unfortunately, this was triggered by another revolt. Okay, now Bar Kokhba, the leaders of the second Jewish war, the Kitos War. Why is it called Kitos, by the way? Because it was crushed by a Roman general whose name was Quietus. Quietus has to do with quiet. So, as that is an honorary name, I don't know. But he did quiet things down by just killing everybody. But so Quietus became Kitos, and so became the Kitos War. This is called the Bar Kokhba revolt. And Bar Kokhba is actually celebrated as a hero in many Jewish history books. But a tragic hero, of course, because it ended in huge loss of lives. Not good, in my opinion. Not good, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so how did Christianity now start? It's very interesting because I'll go back and forth a bit. Here in the first Jewish war, There were already Christians, and I already described how Christians who are not Jewish might have reacted to this uprising, right? Now, there were also still Christians who were Jewish, who were practicing Judaism, but believing that Jesus was the Messiah. Those people would not have participated in this first Jewish war either, because it was a messianic war. They were waiting for the return of Jesus, and that was what their hopes on. So this is an example how, at least in this stage, believing in Jesus as the Messiah prevented people from waging war. So that's kind of a good thing for Christianity in this case, I think. But you would think that I can imagine that for those people, the separation between them and the regular Jews who didn't believe in Jesus, there was, and the fact that the temple was destroyed will for them then be a confirmation that they were right. See, they were wrong, and that's why they lost. Now here, the second Jewish war, probably similar, but the third Jewish war, that was even more profound, because Bar Kokhba claimed to be the leader. He claimed to be the messianic king appointed by God, and he demanded that the Jews would follow him. You have to, of course, you have to obey the king, right? You can't, otherwise it's a rebellion against the king. Now he believed he was the king appointed by God, as I said. So he demanded all the Jews would fight with him. Now the Jesus following Jews did not want to do that, because they said, "You're not the Messiah. We already know who the Messiah is," and so they didn't follow him. And so and he would retaliate against them as being subordinate rebels. So this, the last point on the left, the fifth, final schism between Jews and Christians. So here, the even Jewish Christians, so to say, it's a strange term, but Jewish Christians, let's call them that for now, would be alienated more from Judaism because of this, because they had to choose, basically. Either you're Jewish and you're with Bar Kokhba, or you're not, and then you're a traitor. And so they probably chose for the second option. Now, how did this continue? Christianity actually grew quite fast in the Roman Empire. There were a number of reasons. First of all, the first people who joined this movement were often Hellenist Jews. This would be a whole class to talk about Hellenist Judaism. I'm not going to do that, but but I'm going to do it very briefly. There were, outside of the land of Israel, a lot of Jews who were part of the Hellenist culture. They read Odysseus. They read the Torah and their whole service in Greek, not even in Hebrew. That was a type of Judaism that the whole service was in Greek, not in Hebrew, because they didn't know Hebrew. And they had their own customs. But they felt very Greek, but they also felt Jewish. And they would be proud to be Greeks, but what was painful for them is that the other Greeks didn't accept them because they were Jewish. They felt they wanted to hold on to monotheism, to believing in just one God, an invisible God, and they would not want to be with those statues and worship them. The one thing that dismissed them, that people looked down upon, is that the men were circumcised. For Greek philosophy, that would go against nature, against the order of creation. That would be a violation of the divine order. So that was one thing. And secondly, they were seen as belonging to a different tribe. Now, Christianity offered a community where Jews and non-Jews, who all believed in monotheism and in Jesus, could participate together as equals. So they were not now a frowned upon minority anymore. They could be part of it. So in the beginning, Hellenist Jews were very much attracted to it because they thought it was just Judaism, but with a Messiah. Now, also many Romans and Greeks had lost their belief in the old gods, in Zeus and Jupiter is the Roman name for Zeus, but all the other gods Demeter and Diana and all these gods and goddesses that were bickering on Mount Olympus, and they thought that's just metaphor, and it's really there's a unity in the universe, so there has to be one God, and he cannot be visible because he is above nature. So all these things, they thought that Jews were really like philosophically much higher by embracing that. And when there was, but also there were many Romans and Greeks were attracted to Judaism, but again, circumcision was a big stumbling block for them. Went against their belief system, their culture, and besides the fact that it's also very unpleasant at a later age. So when Christianity offered a kind of Judaism that you could just join without being circumcised, it was also very attractive. And just be a monotheist. But then there's some other things that 2 other points. There were plagues and pandemics all the time. People didn't know the causes, they didn't know how to treat it, and they couldn't treat it because there were no vaccines and there were all these things, and people died. Now, what would Greek thinkers do? A Greek thinker, philosophically, would say, if you follow Greek philosophy, that means you're rational. You always do the right thing. You follow the order of the universe. That's called the logos. So always do what makes most sense. And just like the universe makes sense, do you want to be in harmony with God? Then you're in harmony with the universe, and then you do what makes sense. Now, if there's a pandemic coming to the city, what makes most sense? The cities are cramped within walls. You go into nature, like people go to the Catskills or to to other places. If they had a second home, they would leave the city when the pandemic started here. So people would do that, including doctors. There were doctors, but the doctors, as soon as they heard there's a pandemic, they would leave. And anyone who's healthy would leave. Of course, that would also spread the disease, but that's what happened. So the sick people were left behind, and nobody would take care of the sick. And people didn't have toilets in those days or faucets with water. You'd have to go. People defecated on the street in these gutters. And when it rained, it would clear out. So there's a lot of germs going around. And but not only that, also the water, you'd have to go to the town square and pump the water. And if you're sick, nobody's going to do that for you and give you water. So there were actually, from antiquity, there are reports that people would die on the street while trying to reach the water and be exhausted and just die. So Christians believed that it was one of the works of, compassion. There's another word for it, but that means the same thing, is tending to the sick. So what they would do, but you could die. Well, they say, well, that's the price we pay. Jesus died for us and we died for him. So that's our cost. So Christians were very much into martyrdom because they want to, in those days at least, it's an honor to follow in the footsteps of Jesus who died for somebody else. Suffering, you get a reward, and it's an honor if you do it for your belief system. So Christians would often stay and take care of their sick. That means that Christians had a higher chance to survive. And it also means that often Christians took care of other sick, that those people who would survive often had to thank the Christians who stayed behind, who didn't flee. Meaning that Christians the Christians didn't die as much. And also people who would be cared for by Christians had then a favorable idea about Christians and maybe were more, let's say, inclined to join them, especially when later in the Roman Empire, when Christianity was persecuted by the Romans for a while, these people would say, no, but they're good people. They helped me save my life. I'm going to join them. Okay. And finally, Christians also rejected abortion and infanticide. In Roman culture and Greek culture, it was totally normal. They didn't think that an unborn child was a human being, and even a young child being born was a human being. So if they didn't want a child, men were in charge of their women, their wives. They were the boss. They decided anything. A wife is just almost like a slave to the husband. and they would order them to have an abortion if they wanted to. And that was, of course, not very sterile. So many women died from abortions, many. And second of all, if the child was born, and let's say it was a girl and they wanted a boy, or it was something wrong with the baby, what they would do, they would just either kill it or leave it on the street. If somebody finds it and they want it, they can take it. So they could take it, sell it, raise it as a slave, or abuse, or adopt it, of course, and take care of it. That happened. Or if nobody wanted it, stray dogs would eat the baby. These things happened. That's called infanticide. Christians and Jews, of course, too, but Christians rejected that. So also they would take in all these babies. That also helped spread the gospel, so to say. All right. I'm talking way too long, as I usually do. Only 4 slides so far. And already almost half an hour gone. I hope you find it interesting nonetheless. Now, Emperor Constantine, he was an emperor. He actually saw in 313, that's quite a bit later, that Christianity was undermining the structure of Jewish society as they knew it. And many emperors had persecuted the Christians, but they became more and more successful the more they were persecuted. And Constantine the Great said, we cannot do this anymore. So this has to stop. Otherwise, it's just... And he announced freedom of religion, which meant freedom for Christians. Now, later, he actually favored Christianity. He saw coming that Christianity had the future. And at his deathbed, he was baptized. He's also called Saint Constantine by many Christians because he promoted Christianity. So he's believed to be a saint. He, the Great, well, he also moved the capital from Rome because he thought it was outdated. He wanted to make a whole new beginning, new religion, basically new ideology, a new identity, a new capital. He moved it to Byzantium, which is now called, of course, Istanbul. Byzantium, but he called it Constantinople after himself. He was not called the Great for nothing. He really liked himself and his own name, and he had lots of children. Constantine, Constantina, Constantinus, whatever. All the children were called after him. And so Constantinople became the new Rome. As often is referred to as Rome, even though it wasn't original Rome, in the new Christian style with churches and cathedrals, etc., etc. Now, the Emperor Theodosius I, which came a bit later after him, so Constantine died in 337, and Theodosius in 380. There's a bit time in between. In between was actually an emperor who wanted to go back to paganism, but that didn't last very long. So Theodosius, he goes even a step further. He declares Christianity the only authorized religion. So the other religions were not allowed anymore. You couldn't be like say a Greek pagan. You couldn't offer to sacrifice to Zeus anymore. So a lot of these temples became churches. It was outlawed. And if you were Mithraic religion, or there was all these, there's a lot of cults there also that how do you say, competed with Christianity, were also very popular. Some cults from Egypt, from Persia, all outdated, outlawed. Christianity was the only allowed religion, with the exception of Judaism, because Judaism is accepted by the New Testament. Jesus seems to say that, say some good things about Jews, at least. He didn't say outlaw them. So Christians have the scripture that Jesus based his claims on. He says, he quotes the Torah, what he calls the Torah and the prophets and the Psalms. Jesus came to the Jews first. The only thing is Jews are so blind and stubborn that they don't want to embrace Christianity. So there is a problem with the Jews. Now, but if we just let them be, there's a danger. That was at least perceived by Theodosius and the others. They know the scripture really well, but they interpret it differently. And sometimes they might have quite hard arguments against Christianity that are hard to counter. And some people might be attracted to their rituals because, it says in the New Testament that on the 8th day of his of his birth, Jesus was circumcised. So people might think, "Ooh, Jesus was circumcised. We want to do that too." That's Jewish, but we know that Jesus kept the Sabbath in some way or another. We know that he went to Jerusalem to celebrate Sukkot, the festival of booths. We know that his Last Supper was a Passover Haggadah meal. So those are Jewish rituals. So people who want to follow in Jesus' footsteps might make the mistake that they might think that it would be a good thing to do these too. And that would attract people to Judaism. And that is not so good. So the policy that he came up with, and which was followed after him, was to isolate the Jews, to not let them interact too much with non-Jews, and to limit their influence, and also to keep them in an inferior position, meaning that they cannot get certain jobs, they cannot, they keep them a bit poor. So people will not be tempted to become Jewish so much, that Judaism will become less attractive. If you say, "Oh, I want to become, I really want to become the head of police, or I want to become a headmaster in school, or whatever, or I want to become a minister of defense, or the president of the United States." And if these jobs are off limit for Jews, then maybe you're going to say, "Well, no, I don't want to be Jewish." And even Jews who want to promote themselves might say, "You know what? I'll give up Judaism so I can get a better career." So that was basically his policy. Now let's look at a map. This is at the time when Theodosius I died. This is what it looked like. So the empire was divided into two: the West and the East Roman Empire. Now we call the East Roman Empire Byzantium. That's what the word Byzantine comes from. That's the Byzantine Empire, Byzantium, and Byzantium, as you recall, is the original name of Constantinople. That was a small town called Byzantium initially. Now, the main language of the West was Latin, and the main language of the East was Greek. So you also will have eventually that the church also split into along these same borders. So you have the West, the Western Church, the Latin Church, which is now called Roman Catholic because Rome is their capital, and the Eastern Orthodox Church, or Byzantine Church, this is also the same, which originally their religious capital is Constantinople. Okay, so that is basically the situation. Now we are getting closer to the text, and I should try to speed up a bit. Now look at this map. You see, there were a lot of tribes there were still roaming tribes, warring tribes, like the Mongolians, who actually, sacked Europe time and time again. You had the Goths, the Ostrogoths, you had the Huns, and you had the Vandals. Now you see here an image. This is a Roman statue of a Roman emperor who they take down. Of course, this is romanticized painting, but supposedly these are either the Vandals or the Huns, and or the Visigoths. So they all do the same thing. And this is not because they wanted to cancel people in history, but just because they are Vandals. This is what the word vandalism comes from. They destroyed a lot and then plundered, etc. So you see that there was some of this looting going on in the Eastern Roman Empire, but the Western Roman Empire has a lot more. So the Western Roman Empire is much weakened by these things. The Vandals actually went all here, and then they took Carthage, and then they were back to Rome and plundered left and right. The Visigoths actually settled here in Spain. So everybody came from somewhere, Central Asia, or probably Central Asia. This is what the Caucasus is called, the Caucasus. That's why they call white people Caucasians, even though the Huns were not Caucasians at all. They were Mongolians, interesting, scary people. At birth, the parents would mutilate the children, cut off their ears and burn their faces. And so they would really look horrible. Why? To make them men so they wouldn't look in the mirror and be vain. Second of all, to be more scary to the enemies. And it's unbelievable. It's scary people. Okay, so now, as a result of the weakening of the Western Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire took advantage. You see here, the Byzantine Empire now soon enough has big parts of the Western Roman Empire. So this is what the Byzantine Empire was. Even some of the south of Spain, part of Morocco, so North Africa, a lot of it had been Western. See, all the way from the middle of Libya, and here, see, almost all these territories in North Africa are Byzantine, and even parts of Rome, of Italy. So that is the heartland of the Catholic Church, is Italy. And Rome, I think even Rome for a very short period of time was under the Byzantines, or even though the leadership of the Western Roman Church, the Western Church was still in Rome, but it was for a while Byzantine territory. Now you see here the north of Italy, very interesting, because I'll mention something about that. There is this town called Ravenna, and it has amazing Byzantine art. That here you see again. See, you see here actually Ravenna is mentioned. So now you have the two big empires are the Byzantine Empire, because the Western Roman Empire fell apart just in small. Technically, there is a Western Roman Empire. It's called the Holy Roman Empire, but it's only on paper. You heard of Charlemagne? He was the emperor for a certain point of the Western Roman, but he had all these kings under him. So he was more like all these local kingdoms and fiefdoms did their own thing. It wasn't a unified thing. The Byzantines were unified. They were really an empire. So you had the Byzantine Empire, which is basically a Christian version of the Greeks. And you had the Sassanid Empire, which is the Persians. So the Greeks and the Persians. The Greeks and the Persians had been at each other for centuries after centuries after centuries. Hundreds of years before the Common Era, you had the Greeks and you had the Persians. Sometimes one was dominant, sometimes the other. And now you have the same thing. It's just the Greeks are now called Byzantines, but it's the same thing. Good, I'm going to continue. Here, this on the right, you have images of Byzantine art in Ravenna. So the Byzantines don't have statues, they have mosaics and they have icons, which is not three-dimensional, but two-dimensional pictures. And this is a side note, but I can't help to tell things, I like it. I hope you like it too. So if you ever go to Italy, try to visit Ravenna if you're interested in art, because this is probably the best preserved Byzantine art that's old from the Middle Ages. Why? Constantinople was the capital. We know that was amazing. People thought they were in heaven. It was the big church that they built there. It's called the Hagia Sophia, meaning the Holy Wisdom Church. That must have been overwhelmingly beautiful, but that was eventually conquered by the Turks, who demolished all these almost everything and plastered over it, and there's nothing, and everything of value was melted, and so it's not there anymore. So, but because these forces never reached Ravenna, and though it was Byzantine for quite a while, this is the best preserved old Byzantine, early Byzantine art. Now, the Byzantine Church developed its art and liturgy to a beautiful height. So, a musical tradition, etc., etc., and Jews do that too. Now, I'm just going to play here something, which is Psalm 51. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love. This is Byzantine music, be it in Aramaic actually, but still same musical style, and I like it very much. It's beautiful. Let's listen. Okay, I think it's beautiful, but who am I? Okay, so Jews are always influenced by their surrounding culture. So when beautification of prayer and liturgy in the general culture is highly valued, no surprise that Jewish liturgy developed in that direction as well. So under the Byzantines, Jews were influenced and inspired by also making poetry and putting psalms to music and stuff. And this is where you have something called piyut, which is piyut, poet, same word. So it's actually piyut is a Hebrew word, but it comes from Greek, poetry. So liturgical poetry starts here. We're now getting to a poet called Yanai, Greek name. That was very normal for Jews to have Greek names in those days, and still sometimes that's Alexander is still a very common name in Judaism. He lived around the 7th century under Byzantine rule, probably in Palestine, but perhaps in the south of Italy, because as you see, the land of Israel, called Palestine often, was under the Byzantines, but also the south of Italy here was Byzantine. And so we have, of course, we have poetry in the Bible. There's the Psalms, for instance, and there's other poetry in the Bible. But yeah, after the Bible, so later than that, he's the oldest Hebrew Jewish poetry after that is post-biblical. And it's the first time also that we see Hebrew poetry with end rhyme. Now, I could give a whole class, and I've done it in the past, on Yanai. He's a very interesting character and is very impressive. Now, what was interesting, there were two kinds of Jews. You had, let's hear, Palestinian Jews, as the scholars call it, Jews who lived in the land of Israel, in the Holy Land, and you had Babylonian Jews who lived in Babylonia, which is Mesopotamia, which is roughly Iraq. And so the two had different. There's a Babylonian Talmud and there's a Israeli, Palestinian Talmud, sometimes called the Jerusalem Talmud. And there was also different liturgy and different ways of interpreting. Now, one of the differences was that the Jews of Babylonia, here from Iraq, who lived under the Persians, they read the whole Torah in 1 year. And that is still the common practice, has become the common practice for all Jews. But what we call the Palestinian Jews, nowadays in Israel, that's an oxymoron, Palestinian Jews, but historically you can talk about that. That's a term, that's a thing. They read the whole Torah in a bit over 3 years, probably 3.5. So you read it twice every 7 years. That, I think that's what the case, but I'm not 100% sure, but 3 years plus. And so you have, so for the Babylonian Jews, the Torah is divided in a bit more than 50 portions because there's 52 weeks in the year. And sometimes you have a leap year. So there's let's say roughly 52, on average, 52 portions that you divide the Torah in. So every week you read a portion, done, okay? Then you finished right at the end of the year. Now, for the others, the Palestinian Jews, of course, they have more portions, but because they divided over 3 years. Now, what did Yanai do? He composed, and also there was a time that there was a lot more flexibility in the prayers. So, for instance, there's prayers that we say today. To start with, "Blessed are you, Lord our God," and then you maybe you took care, you were kind to our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and please be care to us. And we trust that you will continue that, something like that. And the end, you say, "Blessed are you, Lord, protector of Abraham," which is our most important ancestor. So in the olden days, the beginning of that blessing was said, and the ending of the blessing was said, but in the middle, we had a lot of flexibility. And especially what we call the Palestinian Jews. So Byzantine Jews, and Palestinian Jews is very much overlapping term. So Yanai would write a different liturgy for every day of for every Shabbat, every week, for Shabbat, not for the weekdays, no, but for the Shabbat, the holy day of the Jews, he would write a different liturgy. He write especially the first 3 blessings of the Shabbat service. He would write a different version for every week and connect it to the portion of the Torah that would be read that week. That means he wrote approximately 150 different versions of the prayer with poetry inside. Now, a lot of it is lost because people eventually stopped using the 3-year cycle. Everybody went to the first-year cycle somewhere along the Middle Ages. I would say after whatever 1200, there's 1300, but then there would be very few people who still keep the 3-year cycle. So we don't do that anymore. So in a way, his poetry has become obsolete because you can't apply it to our system anymore. So it's lost. But we found some old manuscripts with his poetry, although a lot has been deteriorated. Paper, when you store it and you hide it or you bury it or you do whatever you do, it's going to be having holes. There's a lacuna. There's bits that you find. Now, a rather big part has been found of the prayers for 1 week. That is starts with Genesis 31, verse 3. The Lord said to Jacob, "Go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you." That's the main theme of that portion. It's not a portion we have now. We have bigger portions, as I already said, but that was a portion. So 1 week, he wrote poems that inserted in the liturgy, in the prayer, that were focusing on that text. Okay. So I'm not going to do the whole thing because it's quite expensive, but some of it. So for instance, here you see the Hebrew on the right and the English on the left. And what I have in blue is the word fear, and in Hebrew, the same word. So because do not fear, actually, it doesn't, I should have written that here. That's also do not fear, but go back to the land of your ancestors, of your fathers. So the word fear is in this poem very very central. I've been talking, and talking is not usually how I teach. I usually give people chances to say something. Now, on top of my list is Justin Miranda. Justin Miranda, are you available? And would you like to? Oh, you put yourself on mute quickly, huh? And would you be willing to read this this poem for us? This part of the poem.
Sure. Okay, so fear and awe are nothing for those who fear. You're in for.
Who fear you? Fear you.
Oh, fear you.
And
For in
fearing God
you.
means having awe and respect for Him, basically.
Okay, so for in fearing you, all who oppose you are like nothing. You said to the man who feared, of what are you afraid? How can a God-fearing man fear one who is filled with fear? He feared you in his own land and outside it as well. You fulfilled his desire, and he kept his counsel. O Lord, you cared for him and restored him to his birthplace by sending him to his tranquility, to his serenity, to his home.
Yeah. Now you see the word fear, 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 fear. It's a play on word because fearing is afraid of humans, but it's also a God-fearing man, which is Jacob in this case. God's fear. If you fear God, you don't have to fear people, because these other people are afraid, so they fear. In any case, it's a huge play on words. So you see in blue on the right how that word occurs, especially in the beginning. And now the first letter of the poem spells Yanai's name. Those are the letters in red. So we actually signed every week in that part of the liturgy. There's a structure that comes back every week, and the specific part of it always spells Yanai every week. Okay, now there's another part, and it continue as it is written, and maybe Abigail would like to read this.
Yeah, I can read. As it is written, as for you, have no fear, my servant Jacob, says the Lord. Be not dismayed, O Israel, for I am here. I deliver you from afar with your descendants from the land of captivity. Jacob shall once again have serenity and peace, and nothing shall make him tremble.
So this is a text not from the Torah, but from one of the prophets, Jeremiah. And here Jeremiah is speaking to Jacob to go back, but this was way after Jacob lived. So Jacob stands for his descendants. Another name for Jacob is Israel. He had two names, Jacob and Israel, but now his descendants are the people of Israel. This now becomes a prayer or a hope, again, of a messianic redemption, that God will bring the people who are expelled from the land back to the land. Yes, continue.
Okay. As it is said, erect markers for yourselves, set up signposts, set your hearts upon the highway, the path you walk. Return, O maiden Israel, return to these your towns.
Mm-hmm. And then in the liturgy it goes to Vata kadosh ushebti lot Israel, and you are holy, enthroned on the praise of Israel. This is in the third blessing, by the way, of the main prayer called the Kedusha. I think, I'm not 100% sure actually, but this is it's leading up to it, and they always has here El na leolam ta'arotz. Oh God, may you be revered forever. It continues, and I'm going to ask Axel to read this, if Axel is still here.
Oh yeah, sorry. He reversed and reneged. He twisted and tricked. He distorted and deceived, perverted and warped. You knew how Levan treated the pure, and whom you made. The chat.
You made pure.
You made pure the perverse. You treat perversely, but with pure, your acts are pure. His body ravaged by frost, and his form scorched by fire. Near his end, because of the heat, and almost finished because of the cold. He sought to consume his strength and his labors, his waves and his wages, and in the end, his life. He starved him countless times, and he aged him early, with no end. But you have seen that every affliction finds its end. The time appointed for his return approached, and you said to him, return.
Return.
Yeah. As he had trusted you back when he said, it will return. I will return. You promise him, I will let you return.
Okay, so this is also in, of course, doesn't rhyme in English, but in Hebrew it rhymes and it has a nice meter, meaning that Laban was the evil person who treated Jacob very badly. And then in the end, God says you can return, and he courageously said, okay, I will. That took some courage, and then he returned. So this is for the readers a something that appears to them, because Laban is like the Byzantine, the Roman oppressors, right? Who actually don't treat them as nicely, who keep them poor, who keep them oppressed. So all these things that they warped and they perverted and they deceived and they distorted. This is what people let's say experienced by the government, and so they're almost finished, consumed. The strength are consumed. Sometimes heat, sometimes cold. His wares and his wages are constantly changed, so that also the laws change for Jews constantly. They don't know what they're up to, but in the end, God says, "You shall return to your land," and they will courageously, "We will return." Okay, I'm going to Abigail. Andy, sorry.
A stranger and foreigner was he considered. In a land foreign and wholly strange he dwelt. Go back is not what was said to him. Turn back is what was said to him. When he was brought back to shelter and to do repentance. We have strayed among foreigners, and we are scattered among strangers. We are mixed up among peoples and mixed in with nations. O Lord, again return to us and turn us onto you. Let us live securely and settle us in serenity.
So here, going back to the land is now combined with repentance. We also have to go back to God if we are not really closely connected to Him, and then He will will bring us back. Now, I will continue. So there were anti-Jewish laws. What were these repressive laws? The Jews, there were laws. Jews had to pay an extra tax called the Fiscus Judaicus. And there was a feisty tax for, like, okay, if you don't want to pay the tax, become a Christian. A Jew could not testify against a Christian in court. So let's say you're a Jew and a Christian says, smashes your windows or breaks your car, you cannot testify against him. So it's very, very hard. Then you just, you're almost game for anyone. You're not allowed to build synagogues. You can only repair old ones. Jews were not allowed to have Christian slaves. Slavery was very common, and it was actually seen in the Roman and Greek culture as something was part of the natural order. You always have leaders and you have followers. You have bosses and you have servants. You have slave owners and you have slaves. It was not at all connected to ethnicity. You had these slaves were white, in my opinion, I think, in those days, in that time, or almost all. But the thing was, why could a Jew not have a Christian slave? There's a Jewish law. First of all, you don't want anyone to be Christian to be under a Jew. So that's one thing. But also, a Jew who owns a slave in those days, there was a law that he had to, let's say, convert him halfway. So he would have to keep some of the Jewish laws. And now, if a slave, a Jew could have a Jewish slave also. There were Jewish slaves. Now, a Jewish slave, there was a special law. After 6 years of working, you have to let your slave go. Now, if you have a non-Jewish slave, the slave could convert to Judaism, and then the 6 years would count, and the 7th year he would be off. So it would be tempting for a Christian slave to become Jewish, so he would get his freedom. So they could not allow that, of course. And then there were some laws that you couldn't celebrate Passover if it fell before Easter. You had to wait, postpone it a month, I guess. And the Torah had to be read in Greek before Hebrew. If you want to read in Hebrew, then first in Greek. Greek is more important than Hebrew. And they were not allowed to study the Mishnah. The Talmud was still in process, but people studied Mishnah, which is part of the Talmud, was finished. That was not allowed to be read. Now, we have only 15 minutes, and that's not going to work. But we're doing what we can. We do our best. Look, there was other Byzantine-Persian war, like there had been many wars, Greeks against Persians against. Now, Emperor Heraclius, here's his passport photo on this coin, and Shah Khosrav II, he was the Shah of Persia, they went to war. Now, the Persians had been good to the Jews most of the times. It had been a long time ago, let's say roughly 500 years before the Common Era. And so we're now living in, when exactly? In let's say 600 years after, so 1100 years before, a long time ago, there was the first great king of the Persians, the Shah, was Cyrus the Great, and he had the Jews were in exile then, and he had allowed them to go back to the Holy Land and to rebuild the temple. Now, so Jews had for a long time been feeling somewhat warm towards the Persians. Because that's what the Persians did. So maybe there was an idea in this war. See, the Byzantines had been really pressing down on the Jews very hard and making life quite miserable, while the Persians had a good reputation. And the Jews who lived still in Persia, the Babylonian Jews, had limitations, but not nearly as bad as the people under the Byzantines. So when these went to war, the Jews were thinking of King Cyrus the Great and thinking, you know what, maybe this will happen again. Maybe now here Khosrav II, the Shah, will do the same. Maybe he will deliver us. We've been praying for this redemption, that this will end. Maybe the liberation will come again from the Persians. And maybe if they win, they will let us rebuild the temple again. Why not? Right? Now, 1100 years before that happened, this king Cyrus the Great had done this through a person who was a descendant of King David, Zerubbabel. Now, there is a document called the the Apocalypse of Zerubbabel. So I'm going to talk about the Chronicles, no, I've said it again, the Apocalypse of Zerubbabel, which means it's written in the time that we're talking about, but it is written as if it's, let's say, a false document. To be very frankly, if you want to say it in modern terms, a false document, but you don't have to look at it that way. But when I say false, okay, it was written in the Middle Ages, but it was written in an old style, as if Zerubbabel had written this book, the Apocalypse of Zerubbabel, 1100 years before. So before this, right? Way before. So it's confusing, but keep that in mind. Now, when the Persians attacked, they come from the north. They have to go through Galilee, which is an area in the north of Israel, and to Judea, to Jerusalem, in order to conquer the land from the Byzantines. Also Egypt, they would try to take Egypt, etc. Now, when the Persians invaded Palestine, and they go through Galilee, there was still, Jews were not allowed to live in Judea because of the Byzantines. That was banned. But in Galilee, there was a lot of Jewish communities there. And the Jews made militias, and they joined the Persians, and they fought side by side with the Persians against the Byzantines. Another Messianic war, so to say, but now with the Persians. And the general was called, the Persian general, Shahabaraz. But the Jews The Jewish forces were led by a person called Nehemiah ben Hushiel. Nehemiah ben Hushiel. So they fought side by side, and believe it or not, they actually captured the city of Jerusalem from the Byzantines. So the Persians and the Jews together. But Shahbaraz said, you Jews, you want that city so badly, you can have it. Let us just take care of the city, and we will continue chasing the Byzantines out of Egypt. Take care. Okay, so the Jews now have the city of Jerusalem. They think, oh my goodness, maybe this is true. Yes, this is just like Cyrus the Great, who gave us 1500 years ago the city of Jerusalem, and Shahbaraz did the same thing. Yoo-hoo! So they started already thinking, oh, we can rebuild the temple. We can go back to our glory. Hallelujah. So they started rebuilding the temple. At least Nehemiah ben Hushiel, as I said, this was the leader of the Persians. He started appointing a council of 16 righteous men, so to say, and he started to look who would be the good person to be the high priest, and he started making preparations to rebuild the temple. But what they didn't do is kick all the Christians out. They said, let the Christians live here under us. Maybe it's not so bad. Maybe they have Jewish ancestors anyway. A lot of Christians in Judea actually had Jewish ancestors. And they let them. They didn't massacre them. They didn't even kick them out. Very nice for those days. Seems reasonable. But what happened after a few months, the Christians revolted, and they take over by surprise, and they kill all the Jews in the city, including Nehemiah ben Hushiel, and they throw his body over the wall. Now, this is, of course, end of the dream. But not only that, it's the Christians didn't only kill the Jews, of course. This was also, they retook the city. Now the Persians have to come back to reconquer it. So there he comes, Shahbaraz with his Persians. They reconquered the city, and of course they don't tolerate this, because now all the Christians are killed. Tens of thousands of Christians who live there. Now the Jews might have thought, those people who survived, might have thought that they would give the city back to the Jews again, but no, that was not true. Khosrav II, the Shah, said, you blew it once, I'm not making this mistake again. Obviously, you cannot take care of a city, so I'm not going to give it back to you. We're going to keep it ourselves. And not only that, he turned against the Jews, because in his empire, in Persia, also Christianity had been growing fastly and becoming more popular. And so he sided with the Christians, which means becoming anti-Jewish. Now, the Jews could not live in or around Jerusalem anymore, just like with the Byzantines. There was a small synagogue on the Temple Mount that was destroyed, and the Jews now also had to pay heavy taxes, just like under the Byzantines. So this was a total flip of the coin. Everything turned to disappointment. It was very interesting that General Shahbaraz would become the Shah the next year, and he sent his son to Constantinople to be baptized and raised as a Christian. So he was thinking, he was already planning to commit a coup and to grab the empire. And you think, we're going to make peace with the Greeks, because if we have the same religion, it's going to be easier. And so he's thinking that the future of Persia would also be Christian. That was just like Constantine the Great. Unfortunately for Shahbaraz, he was killed a few years later after, and then replaced by someone else. That didn't happen. Now, in that time, nobody knew what was going to happen, because in Arabia, nobody paid attention to these Bedouins there. In that time, that same year, 629, in the town of Mecca was conquered by somebody new on the firmament called Muhammad. And only a few years later, Jerusalem and even the Persian Empire would both fall in hands of the Muslim armies. But that's for another class. Now we're looking at our text, the Apocalypse of Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel, remember, I don't know if you paid attention, had been a person that was sent by the Persians to build a second temple. Now the Apocalypse of Zerubbabel is written much later. You will see many cases where books are written in the name of somebody who lived a long time before, and that gives the book authority. People say, a hidden book written by Zerubbabel about the future, something's going to happen in our days, because you get everybody's attention, right? So it's not written by Zerubbabel, but it's written in the name of Zerubbabel, okay? Now, a prophetic vision of Zerubbabel ben Shealtiel, that is the same Zerubbabel who was in charge of rebuilding the temple. This is the word which came to Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah. So remember, that was 1100 years before this was actually written, but it is as if Zerubbabel, in the time of Koresh the Great, had written it. On the 24th day of the 7th month, the Lord showed me this spectacle there while he was prostrate in prayer. So in those days, Jews prostrated while praying, meaning they bowed down in prayer, right? Palestinian Jews. Now, the Babylonian Jews did not, the Palestinian Jews did. There was another difference in their liturgy. Was prostrate in prayer before the Lord my God, experiencing a visionary spectacle which I saw by the river Kebar. Here is the river, it still exists. It's now called River Chabur in Iraq, but that's where this took place. And as I was reciting the passage which ends with, "Blessed are you, O Lord, the one who resuscitates the dead." Yeah, that's in Hebrew, Hayeh HaMetim. So he's talking about what we now call the Amidah, the standing prayer. Obviously, the Amidah wasn't called Amidah, wasn't called standing, because it was said in prostration, right? My heart groaned within me, thinking, how will the temple come again into existence? He answered me from the doors of heaven and said to me, "Are you Zerubbabel ben Shealtiel, governor of Judah?" I responded, "I am your servant." So it is as if Zerubbabel wrote this, right?
He answered me and conversed with me just as a person would speak to his friend. I could hear his voice, but I could not see his appearance. I continued to lie prostrate as before, and I completed my prayer. Then I went to my house. On the 11th day of the month Adar, he spoke to me there again, and he said to me, "Are you my servant, Zerubbabel?" I responded, "I am your servant." He said to me, "Come to me, ask, and I will tell you." I answered and said, "What might I ask? That my appointed lifespan be short and my destiny fulfilled?" A wind lifted me up between heaven and earth and carried me to the great city Nineveh, city of blood, and I thought, who is me, for my attitude has been disrespectful, and now my life is at great risk.
Yeah, I would be scared if I would have to play Superman all of a sudden, okay?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I arose in distress in order to pray and entreat the favor of the name of the Lord God of Israel. I confessed all my transgressions and my sins, for my attitude had been contentious. I said, "O Lord, I have acted wrongly, I have transgressed, and I have sinned, for my attitude has been disrespectful. You are the Lord God, and one who made everything by a command from your mouth, and who will revivify the dead with the word from your lips."
He said to me, "Go to the house of filth near the market district," and I went just as he had commanded me.
So people who explain this book and who know more about the background think that this house of filth is a derogatory term for a church, but I'm not 100% sure, but okay. Mm-hmm.
He said to me, "Turn this way," and so I turned. He touched me, and then I saw a man despicable, broken down, and in pain. That despicable man said to me, "Zerubbabel."
Zerubbabel? Yeah, okay.
What business do you have here? Who has brought you here?" I responded and said, "A wind from the Lord lifted me up and carried me to this place." He said to me, "Don't be afraid, for you have been brought here in order that he might show you." When I heard his words, I was consoled and regained my self-composure. I asked him, "Sir, what is the name of this place?" He said to me, "This is mighty Rome, wherein I am imprisoned."
Yeah, well, this is probably Constantinople, because that was now called the New Rome. That seems to be the case. Uh-huh.
I said to him, "Who then are you? What is your name? What do you seek here? What are you doing in this place?" He said to me, "I am the Messiah of the Lord, the son of Hezekiah."
Yeah.
confined in prison until the time of the
So
end.
the Messiah is already there, but he is confined. He's basically hidden until the right time.
When I heard this, I was silent and I had hid my face from him. His anger burned within him, and when I looked at him, I became frightened. He said to me, "Come nearer to me." As he spoke to me, my limbs quaked.
He reached out his hand and steadied me. "Don't be frightened," he said, "and let your mind show no fear." He encouraged me and said, "Why did you become silent and hide your face from me?" I said to him, "Because you said, I am the servant of the Lord, his Messiah, and the light of Israel."
So he's kind of nervous.
Suddenly he appeared like a strong young man, handsome and adorned. I asked him, "When will the light of Israel come?" And as I was speaking to him, behold, a man with 2 wings approached me and said to me, "Zerubbabel, what are you asking the Messiah of the Lord?" I answered him and said, "I asked when the appointed time for deliverance is supposed to come." "Ask me," he replied, "and I will tell you." I said to him, "Sir, who are you?" He answered, "I am Michal, the one who delivered good news to Sarah. I am the leader of the host of the Lord God of Israel, the one who battled with Sancherib and smote 180,000 men. I am the prince of Israel, the one who fought battles against the kings of Canaan. In the time to come, I will fight the battles of the Lord alongside the Messiah of the Lord, who sits before you. Against King Strong of Face.
King Strong of Face.
King Strong
Never
of
heard
Face.
of King Strong of Face, but
No, it's
King
new to
Strong
me.
Face. Hmm?
And against Armelos, the son of Satan, who spawned of the stone statue.
Now, Armelos, I just read in another source, Armelos was actually a common word for Romulus, who stands for Rome. So the spawn of the stone statue, so all the stone statues that were in the empire at that time, at the time that we're talking about, Byzantine time, were statues of the Virgin Mary. So that's why people think that it's really what here is basically saying that Rome is equated with Jesus and is spawned out of the statue of Virgin Mary and fathered by Satan, Satan. Yeah, it's quite fantastical, but in any case.
The Lord has appointed me to be the commanding officer over his people and over those who love him in order to battle against the leaders of the nations. Michael, who is also Metatron, answered me, saying, I am the angel who guided Abraham throughout all the land of Canaan. I blessed him in the name of Lord. I am the one who redeemed Isaac and wept for him. I am the one who wrestled with Jacob at the crossing of the Yabak. I am the one who guided Israel in the wilderness for 40 years in the name of Lord. I am the one who appeared to Joshua at the Gilgal. I am the one who rained down brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah. He placed his name within me, Metatron, which in Gematria is the same as Shaddai. As for you, Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, the son of Jeconiah, ask me and I will tell you what happened at the end of days.
Yeah. Now, Gematria is he said Metatron, which is in Gematria is the same as Shaddai. What Metatron is, you see, I wrote it down, but it's a bit speculative. We're not 100% sure, but it could come from Metathronos, which means behind the throne. So an angel who serves behind the throne. Or Metator could be messenger. Also, it sounds a lot like imitator or something. It's supposedly the most important angel in certain forms of Jewish mysticism and Jewish explanation. Also identified, as we saw with Michael, also identified with a term called the angel of the Lord, somebody that represents God. Now, for about Metatron, every and what is Gematria? Gematria is looking at letters and then looking at the value of the letters. Now, every letter in Hebrew has a certain value. So the A, the Aleph, let's say the A is number 1, and the B is number 2, and let's say in if you had a C, it would be number 3. So in Hebrew, that would be Aleph, Bet, Gimel, 1, 2, 3. So every letter has a numerical value, as it's called. Now, if you add up the word Metatron, you end up with the number 314. You see here the M and the T and the T. I wrote it here down. And it's the same value as the word Shaddai, which means Almighty, which is one of the names of God. So this is seen as a proof that Metatron really represents God. So God is so spiritual, God is so high above creation that it's hard for him to imagine interacting with this world. So in certain Jewish explanations of the Torah, when God, let's say, it says God comes down to look at the city, or God walked with Abraham, and Abraham walked with God, and they spoke. How can God walk like a physical, or Jacob fought with God, but at the other hand, you see that he fought with an angel or a man, who knows? But at the end, it turns out he fought with God. Now, how does this all work? And they saw God. How is this possible, even? So in some of these explanations, I say God created an image, it's like an angel, an image that people could look at, so they could have a feeling with God, have an imagination of God, even though it's not fully God. And it's actually, God explains to Moses, I cannot be in your midst, but I'm going to send an angel, and I put my name on him, and he's going to guide you through the desert. So it's a substitute of God, but it's not God. It's not actually one of the first there were some groups of Christians who initially thought that the angel of God that Jesus was that was really Jesus, but that was a theory. So, but the difference is, this angel of God, this Michael, whatever, this created representation of God, so to say, wasn't divine. It was totally a created thing, but so that people could relate to God and have some kind of imaginative relationship with him, because God himself, in his pure essence, is so spiritual and is so above all our imagination that he cannot at all, we cannot even talk about him. No words would describe him. All right? Sorry for this long explanation.
Then he said to me, "This is the Messiah of the Lord. He has been hidden in this place until the appointed time. This is the Messiah of the lineage of David, and his name is Menahem ben Amiel. He was born during the reign of David, king of Israel, and wind picked him up and concealed him in this place, waiting for the end of time."
Yeah.
Metatron, the leader of the host of the Lord, said to me, "The Lord will give a rod of accomplishing these acts to the Hephzibah,
Hephzibah, right.
the mother of Menahem ben Amiel. A great star will shine before her, and all the stars will wander aimlessly from their paths."
So this is very unique in the Jewish apocalyptic writing. That's another word, apocalypse. Okay, what does that mean? But writings about the end of the day, that somebody's mother is instrumental and powerful in fighting, and other people think that is also maybe inspired by what Christians did with their veneration of the Virgin Mary, basically the mother of Jesus, because it's unusual. Okay. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I can't say that word.
Hephzibah.
Hephzibah, the mother of Menahem ben Amiel, will go forth and kill two kings, both of whom are determined to do evil. The names of the two rulers are first Naph, the king of Teman, so named because he will shake his hand towards Jerusalem. And the name of the second is Isrian, king of Antioch.
Oh yeah, you know what? This is a lot of hard words. It's not so. It's the details of when the battle will be. This is all good. This is not so important.
420 years after the city and temple have been rebuilt, they will destroy a second time. He will destroy the sanctuary, stop the daily offering, and saintly people will disperse and will hand them over to the destruction, despoiling, and panic. Many of them will perish due to the faithfulness to Torah, but others will abandon the Torah of the Lord and worship their idols.
From the time that the daily offering ceases and the wicked ones install the one whose name is abomination in the temple, at the end of 990 years, the deliverance of the Lord will take place to redeem them and to gather them by means of the Lord's Messiah. The rod which the Lord will give to, how do you say this?
Hephzibah.
Hephzibah, the mother of Menahem ben Amiel, is made of almond wood. It is hidden in Rakat, a city in the territory of Naphtali, which is Tiberias. It is the same rod which the Lord previously gave to Adam, Moses, Aaron, Joshua, and King David.
So Tiberias is very interesting because that is where the Jewish revolts against Byzantium had been organized. That's where the Jewish troops joined the Persians when they came from the north through the Galilee. Tiberias is the capital of the Galilee. So it's actually after the fact writing about this revolt as if it was already predicted centuries ago by Zerubbabel. Follow?
It is the same rod which sprouted buds and flowered in the tent of meeting for the sake of Aaron. Elijah ben Eleazar concealed it in Rakat. Concealed there as well is a man whose name is
Menachem ben Hushiel. Now that was the leader who had conquered Jerusalem and who was killed at the end. So he's actually now, oh wow, if you read this and you think this is really an old document, can you believe it? Nehemiah ben Hushiel just conquered the city, and now it turns out it was an old writing already centuries and centuries before that he was proclaimed, and his name is actually mentioned. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, if you believe this is really old, it's old now, but it wasn't old then, but you get people really excited. That's really God's plan is being unfolded. So his name is Nehemiah ben Hushiel. Okay, so let's continue.
Me still?
Yes, yeah, why not?
Okay. Zerubbabel spoke up and said to Metatron, Michael the prince, "My lord, please tell me when the Messiah of the Lord will come and what will happen after all this." He said to me, "The Lord's Messiah, Nehemiah ben Hushiel, will come 5 years after
Hephzibah." So this means that Nehemiah ben Hushiel, the leader of the Jewish revolt, is now seen in this document as the Messiah. But there's actually two Messiahs you will discover, which is surprising to many.
He will collect all Israel together as one eternity, and they will remain for 4 years in Jerusalem. The children of Israel will offer a sacrifice, and it will be pleasing to the Lord. He will register the Jews in genealogical lists according to their families.
This is exactly describing what happened. They already started offering sacrifices. They didn't rebuild the temple yet, as we have seen, right? But sacrifices were there. And he will register the Jews genealogical list. We already know also that Nehemiah ben Hushiel, that he was doing genealogical research to find out which family had a pure line to be the new high priest.
But in the 5th year of Nehemiah and the gathering together of the holy ones, Saroi, the king of Persia, will attack Nehemiah ben Hushiel and Israel, and there will be great suffering in Israel.
So this is interesting, because in reality, the suffering was because of the Christian revolt inside the city of the Christians who had been left in place. Here it says that the king of Persia attacked. But what is true that Khosrav did turn against the Jews afterwards, after they took Jerusalem. So it's a bit confusing.
Hephzibah, the wife of Nathan the prophet and mother of Menahem ben Amiel, will go out with the rod which the Lord God of Israel will give to her.
Yeah, I'm now going to go it a little faster. It talks about more battles. So it actually also says that there will be a marble stone in the shape of a virgin. So most likely this refers to the Virgin Mary statues. And then the devil will have intercourse with the statue and spawn somebody's called Armilos, which is is another name for Rome. And then Rome again stands for Christianity. So what he's basically saying is that the devil fathered with the Virgin Mary, maybe Jesus, but at least he's actually saying Christianity, because Rome and Christianity at this point is one, right? Rome is Byzantium and Byzantium is Christianity, and they're carrying in Jewish eyes the legacy of Jesus, which is of course very debatable. And he will rule over all the people, so that means that the Byzantines will rule over all the people, and they will worship other gods, and it's very hard to withstand him. That is Rome. I mean, I think, because it was very hard in the time of the Romans and the Byzantines to withstand that and to say, no, I'm just gonna do my own thing. No, if you didn't become a Christian, it was very hard. There was persecution and oppression, basically. And then it says that Nehemiah ben Hoshiel would be killed. See, with 16 righteous ones. This is what happened. And then he predicts that there's a second Messiah who's going to come. So he is called the Messiah, the son of Joseph, from the line of Joseph. And then there's going to be one, the son of David, and he is the one who will reign after. So it seems that this book has been written after Nehemiah was killed and after the Jews lost the city again, to give people hope that now, okay, what you thought was the Messiah, Nehemiah ben Hoshiel, was killed, but hold on a bit, now the real Messiah is about to come. This is more about Hephzibah, more about a few battles here and there, and then Elijah will come from heaven, the prophet Elijah, and the dead will be resurrected, and also Nehemiah ben Hoshiel will be resurrected, and all is good that ends, all's well that ends well, and there's going to be the glory, and the temple will come down from heaven, already built in heaven by the angels. It's going to come down, so you don't even have to build it yourself, which is very convenient. And there's going to be the glory of the olden age will come back. So the book of Zerubbabel must have been written around, or maybe a few years after 620. That's when everything went bad. After King Khosrau turned against the Jews, he's portrayed as wicked, so that makes sense. And probably even before the death of Khosrau, because it doesn't say that how he's going to die. That doesn't reflect that event isn't reflected in the apocalypse of Zerubbabel.